Hey everyone, I'm Eric and welcome back. Let's kick things off with a little scenario. Imagine you're a manager and your team's productivity has been kind of slipping this past quarter. What's your gut reaction? Do you immediately think, okay, we need to tighten up the KPIs, or maybe start looking up some new fancy software?
Yeah, if your brain just jumps straight to a solution, you're definitely not alone. That's pretty much how most of us are wired. See, our brains just hate uncertainty, so they're built to find patterns and make quick decisions, which means we tend to grab the first, most familiar solution that pops into our heads. But, as it turns out, that's often the worst way to go about it.
Think of it like going to the doctor. You walk in and say, "Doc, I have a headache." A not-so-great doctor might just say, "Here, take some painkillers." That's just treating the symptom, right? But a great doctor, they'll start asking questions. How long has this been going on? Where exactly does it hurt? They're digging to find the root cause, because that headache, it could be a symptom of something way more serious. And that's the whole point. Defining the problem is so much more important than just racing to a solution.
So today we are going to dive into a really powerful framework used by top consultants at places like McKinsey. It's designed to stop you from jumping to conclusions and instead help you systematically find the real root of any problem. We're going to cover how to state the problem, how to structure it, and finally, how to sell your solution. So let's get into it.
Okay, first up, let's talk about the problem with problem solving. We're going to look at this core thinking error that trips up pretty much everyone, and why jumping straight to an answer is almost always a bad idea.
What's really key here is understanding why those top consultants get paid the big bucks. It's not really because they have some secret, brilliant ideas nobody else has. It's because they follow this incredibly disciplined, rigorous process to define the problem with absolute precision before they even start thinking about an answer.
All right, let's get into the first and, honestly, probably the most important step, stating or framing the problem correctly. If you can get this part right, you've basically already won half the battle.
So check out this great story from the book. There was this budget airline in Europe getting tons of complaints about damaged luggage. Now, the obvious knee-jerk solution would be to just be more careful with the bags, right? Maybe retrain the baggage handlers, get some new equipment. Totally logical. But that's not what they did.
Instead, they completely reframed the problem. After digging in a bit, they realized something interesting. Because they were a low-cost airline, a lot of their passengers were using cheaper, lower-quality luggage that was just more likely to break. So the problem wasn't just, our handling is too rough. It was, our passengers' luggage is too fragile. So what did they do? They started selling their own brand of durable, affordable luggage. And boom, complaints went down and they opened up a brand new revenue stream. Genius.
So how do we learn to reframe problems like that? Well, there's a super handy tool for this called the TOSCA framework. It's basically a checklist to make sure you're defining the problem with total clarity. Just remember, TOSCA, T for trouble, O for owner, S for success criteria, C for constraints, and A for actors.
Okay, let's try to apply this to a classic business problem. Sales are down 15%. So using TOSCA, we get really specific. The trouble? Q3 sales are down 15%. The owner with the authority to fix it? The director of sales. What does success look like? Getting sales back to last year's level by the end of Q4. The constraints? We've got a budget under 100K and we're not allowed to cut prices. And the actors involved? The sales team, marketing, our customers, and of course, our competitors. See how that just transformed a vague sense of panic into a clear, actionable mission?
All right, so once we've stated the problem clearly, it can still feel, huge and intimidating. So the next step is to break that big problem down into smaller, bite-sized pieces. This is where we really start to think like a consultant.
The key principle here is something called MIS. It's pronounced MIC. It just means that when you break a problem down, the pieces should be mutually exclusive, so no overlaps, and collectively exhaustive, meaning no gaps. You've covered all your bases and you've done it cleanly. Think about planning a trip. Your big categories might be destination, time, and budget. They don't overlap, and together they cover the main things you need to figure out. It's a really simple way to bring order to chaos.
Now, let's go back to our sales problem and build what's called an issue tree. At the very top, we have our main question. Why are sales down 15%? Well, the most basic formula for sales is volume times average price. So right away, there are only two main possibilities. Either we're selling fewer things or the average price of those things has dropped. It's a perfect, clean MISI breakdown.
So let's say we check the data and find out our average price is actually stable. That's great. It means we can ignore that whole branch of the tree. The problem must be with volume. So we drilled down another level.
We can break down volume into the number of customers multiplied by their purchase frequency. So, are we losing customers, or are our current customers just buying less often?
We check the data again, and what do you know? Purchase frequency is fine. Okay, so now we know the problem is with our total number of customers. We just keep peeling back the onion, right? The change in customers is basically new customers coming in minus lost customers leaving. Are we failing to attract new people, or are we bleeding existing customers? And after one last look, we find the culprit. Our customer churn rate has gone through the roof. We've gone from a fuzzy sales are down to a super specific root cause.
So you've done this brilliant analysis, you found the root cause, you're a genius. But listen, none of that matters if you can't convince the decision makers to actually do something about it. This last step is all about how you package and sell your solution so that people will actually listen up.
Most of us, when we present our findings, we tell it like a detective story. We start at the beginning. First, I pulled all the data. Then I did some interviews. I analyzed the competition. And finally, after all that, I discovered the problem. Sure, it builds suspense, but your boss is busy. They checked their email 2 minutes ago and have already tuned out. The expert way is to use something called the pyramid principle. You just flip the whole thing upside down and start with the answer first.
So let's see how this works for our sales problem. Using the pyramid principle, you walk into that meeting and you lead with, our sales decline is being caused by high customer churn and I have a 3-part plan to fix it. Boom. Right away, they know the answer, they know the cause, and they know you have a solution. Then, you back it up with your supporting arguments, the churn data, the customer feedback. And finally, you lay out your specific, concrete actions. It's just so clear, powerful, and way more persuasive.
So as we wrap things up here, I don't want you to think of this as just some tool you pulled out for one specific problem. I want you to think of it as a complete upgrade for your mental operating system.
Here's your new toolkit, your cheat sheet. First, you state the problem with Tosca to get crystal clear on what you're solving. Second, you structure it with an issue tree and MEIS to find the real root cause. And third, you sell your solution using the pyramid principle to make sure it actually happens. State, structure, sell. Easy enough to remember?
And seriously, this applies to everything in your life. Are you feeling stuck in your career? Use an issue tree to break down exactly why. Facing a tough personal decision? Use the Tosca framework to define what a successful outcome really looks like for you. This whole method is about turning that chaotic, overwhelming feeling into a clear, manageable path forward.
So, I'll leave you with this question to think about. What's a complex problem you're dealing with right now, big or small? After hearing all this, how are you going to approach it differently? What's the very first step you'll take, not to solve it, but to truly define it?
All right, that's everything for today's Explainer. If you found this useful, please do me a favor and hit like, subscribe, and share it so more people can find it. And hey, if there's a book you'd love for us to cover, drop it in the comments below. Thanks for tuning in. I'm Eric, and I'll see you in the next one.